beginning it was a mess, but when we managed to get this away, to clean out the samples, we got really pure DNA to manage to tell.
For more than 100 years, people around the world have been fascinated by the short and mysterious life of King Tutankhamun, the young ruler of ancient Egypt who died when he was only around 18 or 19 years old. His tomb, discovered in 1922 by Howard Carter, remains one of the most famous archaeological finds in history. It was filled with gold, jewels, statues, treasures, and things that showed how important he was to his people. But while the world admired the beauty of the artifacts, scientists were left with one big question. What actually happened to King Tut? For decades, experts debated whether he died from an accident, a sickness, or even a murder. Many theories were suggested, but none of them could be confirmed with absolute proof. Then, in the last few years, a new scientific tool entered the story: modern DNA technology. For the first time, researchers were able to take samples from Tut's bones and tissues and study his genetics in a level of detail never seen before. What they discovered shocked everyone. The DNA showed surprising and disturbing secrets about Tut's family, his health, and even the dangers hidden inside the royal bloodline. It also revealed deep problems in the Egyptian royal family that had been hidden for centuries. When these results were announced, many historians said they were more frightening than anything they had expected, because they changed what we thought we knew about Tut's life, his parents, and the dark truth that may have been responsible for his painful death. The first shocking discovery from King Tut's DNA was about his family background, which turned out to be very different from what most people believed. For a long time, historians thought that pharaohs married within their own families only occasionally, mostly for political reasons. But Tut's DNA proved the truth was far more serious. The test showed that Tutankhamun was a child of two siblings. His father, the famous pharaoh Akhenaten, married his own sister. This kind of close family marriage, called inbreeding, was common among Egyptian royals because they believed it kept their bloodline pure and divine. However, science shows that inbreeding does the opposite. It creates many health problems, weakens the body, and increases the chance of genetic disorders. King Tut's DNA revealed exactly that. The young pharaoh had inherited multiple dangerous conditions from his parents. One of the clearest signs was his physical structure. CT scans and DNA results showed that Tut had a curved spine, a weak immune system, and a deformed left foot. He probably could not walk without help, which might be why more than 130 walking sticks were found inside his tomb. The DNA also showed that Tut had a bone disease that made his leg bones fragile. Some experts believe he suffered great pain during his life and may have struggled even to stand or move without assistance. These genetic problems were so extreme that many historians were alarmed. They realized that the royal family's tradition of inbreeding was not only dangerous, it might have directly caused the early deaths of many pharaohs, including King Tut himself. This discovery changed how historians saw ancient Egyptian royalty and made the story of Tut's short life even more tragic. Another disturbing discovery came from DNA evidence that suggested King Tut had serious health issues that weakened him throughout his life. Scientists found genetic markers showing he had a condition called choler disease, which affects the bones of feet, especially in children. This disease can cause constant pain and difficulty walking. Combined with his already deformed foot, this meant Tut likely lived most of his life in discomfort. There was also evidence of malaria in his genetic samples. Not just one infection, but several repeated attacks. Malaria was common in ancient Egypt, especially along the Nile River, but repeated infections could weaken Tut's body even more. Scientists also found signs that his immune system was not strong enough to fight diseases effectively. This weakness may have allowed even simple illnesses to turn deadly. But perhaps the most terrifying part of his DNA results showed evidence of a possible blood disorder. Some experts believe Tut carried genetic traits linked to sickle cell disease or related conditions that damage blood cells and cause extreme fatigue, pain, and infections. If true, this would have made his already weak body even more vulnerable. These combined issues painted a very sad picture. The boy king, who is often shown as powerful and majestic in paintings and statues, may have spent much of his life sick, tired, and in pain. Some historians were shocked because it meant the most famous pharaoh in the world was, in reality, physically fragile and constantly suffering. Instead of dying from a dramatic murder or palace conspiracy, the truth might be far simpler and sadder. His own royal bloodline, filled with genetic risks, had slowly destroyed his health. These discoveries terrified historians because they showed how much suffering could be hidden behind the glittering gold mask that became the symbol of King Tut. The DNA sequencing also forced historians to rethink the final days of King Tut's life. For many years, there were theories that he had died in a chariot accident because of a fracture in his leg. Others believed he might have been murdered due to a blow to the back of his head. These ideas created dramatic stories, but the DNA, combined with CT scans, offered a different explanation. Scientists found clear evidence that Tut had a serious leg fracture shortly before he died, but the DNA showed he also had conditions that made his bones fragile. This meant even a small accident, like falling, could break his bones easily. Added to this, his weak immune system made it harder for his body to heal. If he developed an infection from a fracture, it could have become deadly. There was also the issue of malaria, which the DNA showed was active in his system at the time of his death. Malaria can cause severe fever, weakness, and organ failure. When all these factors come together, the bone disease, the weak immune system, the repeated malaria attacks, and the leg fracture, a clearer picture begins to form. King Tut likely died not from one dramatic event, but from a combination of health problems that his body simply could not survive. For historians, this was frightening because it meant that the image of the powerful pharaoh was mostly an illusion. Behind the golden mask was a teenager whose body had been failing him for years. This discovery changed the way people understood the ancient world. It showed that even the most important and wealthy people of the past could not escape the dangers of genetic disorders and disease. The story of Tut's death became less about mystery and more about the tragic consequences of royal choices and ancient traditions. One of the most frightening things revealed by King Tut's DNA is what it tells us about the royal bloodline itself. The symptoms found in Tut's genetic code were not random. They were the result of many generations of inbreeding among the rulers of ancient Egypt. Pharaohs believed they were gods on earth, and to protect this divine status, they often married their own siblings or close relatives. But science shows that this practice can pass down dangerous genetic mutations from one generation to the next. Tut's father, Akhenaten, and his mother, who was also Akhenaten's sister, carried harmful genes that they unknowingly passed to their son. At first, these were believed to be symbols of power or status, but DNA evidence and CT scans revealed a deeper meaning. Tut actually needed those canes to walk. Some of them showed signs of real use, which meant they weren't just ceremonial objective DNA. Results suggest that several members of Tut's family may have suffered from similar issues. This means Tut was not the only victim. Some of his ancestors, and even later pharaohs, may have carried the same genetic weaknesses. For historians, this discovery was terrifying because it changed the way we understand royal families of the ancient world. Instead of being seen as powerful rulers with strong bloodlines, many of them might have been dealing with hidden illnesses and physical problems. This also explains why some pharaohs ruled for very short periods, or why some died at young ages without leaving behind heirs. The Egyptian belief in keeping the bloodline pure may have caused the very problems they were trying to avoid. This new understanding has also helped researchers study other ancient remains with greater accuracy. The discovery of mutations in Tut's DNA has encouraged scientists to look at the genetics of other mummies to see if they suffered similar fates. Early results suggest that inbreeding was more common than previously thought and may have affected many royal families throughout history. This adds a dark and tragic layer to the story of ancient Egypt, making the rise and fall of its rulers even more dramatic and complex. As more experts studied King Tut's DNA results, they realized that these discoveries did not just rewrite the young pharaoh's personal story. They forced historians to rethink an entire era of Egyptian civilization. The idea that one of Egypt's most famous rulers lived with severe disabilities and constant illness changed how historians understood daily life in the royal palace. Tut was not the strong, healthy king shown in temple carvings or paintings. Instead, he was a fragile boy who had to manage pain, weakness, and physical limitations while trying to rule a large and powerful kingdom. This raised new questions. Who actually made the important decisions during Tut's reign? Was it his advisors? His generals? His priests? If Tut was often sick or too weak to lead, then much of the power in Egypt may have been controlled by people behind the scenes, which could explain the political instability of that time. His DNA also helped explain why the throne passed so quickly after his death. Since Tut had no surviving children, the royal bloodline was in danger. Historians now believe that the problems caused by inbreeding slowly weakened the entire family, making it harder for them to produce healthy heirs. Some experts even think this may have contributed to the collapse of Tut's dynasty. The DNA findings also revealed new information about the living conditions of ancient Egypt. Malaria in Tut's body showed that the disease was widespread, even in royal palaces. This helped researchers understand the environment and health challenges faced by ordinary Egyptians as well. In many ways, Tut's DNA became a window into ancient life. It showed that even the most powerful rulers could not escape the dangers of disease, poor medical knowledge, and bad genetics. This realization shook many historians because it made ancient history feel more human, more fragile, and more tragic than they had ever imagined. When historians and scientists finally shared the results of King Tut's DNA study with the world, the reaction was immediate. Many people were shocked, not only because of the disturbing truths revealed about Tut's health, but also because of a new understanding of ancient Egyptian culture. The golden mask of King Tut had always created an image of perfection, a young and strong ruler with mysterious, almost magical presence. But the DNA results showed a much different truth. The famous boy king was actually a fragile teenager suffering from genetic diseases, bone problems, and serious infections that were slowly destroying his body. His death was not the dramatic murder or accident many people imagined. Instead, it was a tragic end of a life filled with pain, illness, and the heavy burden of a royal bloodline that carried dangerous secrets. These discoveries terrified historians because they revealed how much suffering was hidden behind the beauty of ancient Egyptian art and the glory of their monuments. They showed that ancient history is not just about great victories, powerful rulers, and rich treasures. It is also about the human struggles that happen behind the palace walls. Today, King Tut's DNA has become one of the most important scientific studies in archaeology. It reminds us that the people of the past were real humans with real problems. Just like us, it also teaches us that even the most powerful empires can be weakened by their own traditions. In the end, the story of King Tut is not only about the discovery of his tomb or the beauty of his treasures. It is a story about a young boy trapped in a royal system that valued purity over health, image over reality, and tradition over survival. His DNA has allowed us to see the truth, a truth that is both fascinating and deeply unsettling as researchers continue to analyze King Tut's DNA. They also use the results to look deeper into the political turmoil surrounding his family. The years before Tut's birth were some of the most confusing in Egyptian history. His father, Akhenaten, had shocked the entire nation by abandoning the traditional Egyptian gods and forcing everyone to worship only one deity, the sun disk, Aten. This religious revolution caused unrest, rebellion, and even economic collapse. When scientists compared DNA data with historical records from this chaotic period, they noticed a disturbing pattern. Several members of Tut's family, including his sisters and half-brothers, also died extremely young or showed signs of genetic diseases. Some were buried in rushed ceremonies, while others were hidden away in unfinished tombs. This raised a frightening question for historians. Was the royal bloodline collapsing even before Tut was born? If many of his relatives were already sick or dying, it meant that the family's generations of inbreeding had reached a critical point that added even more pressure on Tut's birth, because the dynasty desperately needed a healthy heir to stabilize Egypt. But instead of a strong future ruler, they received a child who carried severe genetic weaknesses from both sides of his family. Historians realize that Tut's fragile health may not have been an accident. It may have been the unavoidable result of a dynasty already dying from the inside. This discovery was deeply unsettling because it suggested that the entire political structure of Egypt at that time was built on a foundation that was slowly breaking apart. It also explained why, soon after Tut's death, Egypt saw major power shifts and the disappearance of his family from the throne. The DNA results didn't just reveal Tut's personal tragedy. They exposed the truth about a dynasty on the edge of collapse. As the genetic findings continued to unfold, historians began reassessing the famous artifacts found inside Tut's tomb. Instead of seeing them simply as royal treasures, they started to interpret many of the items as clues to Tut's medical struggles. For example, dozens of walking sticks were placed beside his body. They were essential tools for a young king whose bones and muscles could not support him. There were also several pairs of specially shaped sandals, which experts now believe were designed to help correct his foot deformities. The presence of numerous medicines, balms, and healing oils suggested that Tut relied heavily on medical treatments for pain relief. Even the way his mummy was positioned has been re-examined. His chest cavity showed abnormalities that might be linked to genetic breathing problems, while parts of the skeleton showed signs of stress. These details helped historians understand that Tut's life was not filled with freedom or ease like many imagine. Instead, he lived under constant supervision, surrounded by doctors, priests, and servants who were likely trying to manage his pain and protect him from infections. This painted a more emotional picture of daily life in the palace. Tut may have spent much of his time indoors, away from physical activities, unable to join in the games or ceremonies that other young nobles enjoyed. The tomb items that once seemed luxurious now revealed a story of struggle and vulnerability. For historians, it was disturbing to realize that behind all the gold and grandeur was a boy fighting against a body that was failing him. Every artifact became a piece of evidence that supported the heartbreaking truth revealed by his DNA. Another major revelation